Welcome to the Jewish Psychedelic Podcast, and today I am joined by Marc Aixalà. Marc is the author of this amazing book, Psychedelic Integration, Psychotherapy for Non-Ordinary States of Consciousness, that he wrote in 2022, and we'll be speaking about some of the content of the book today, as well as his own personal path, and I'm so grateful to have you.
Thank you.
Marc is a telecommunications engineer, psychologist, psychotherapist, and certified holotropic breathwork facilitator, specializing in supporting people who face challenging experiences with expanded states of consciousness. Since 2013, in collaboration with the International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research, and Services, ICEERS, Aixalà Marc has offered integration psychotherapy sessions for those seeking support after psychedelic experiences. He also works in clinical psilocybin trials in Europe. Marc, welcome to the Jewish Psychedelic Podcast.
Good morning. Thank you.
And I invited you because I am deeply involved and excited about psychedelic integration more than any other part of the arc of the experience, but also because I had learned along the way that you are Jewish, and becoming Jewish was a choice for you and a choice for your family. So I would love to talk about that as the husband of someone who has also made their way to Judaism. I'd love to hear about your path, what sparked it, and what it looks like today.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That is not something that I talk very often,
Oh,
especially with non-Jewish audiences. They are not so much interested in this. But I would say that my becoming Jewish was a path of integration for me. So it was something that unfolded over, almost a decade. And it was of course, a combination of inner experiences, some of them in non-ordinary state of consciousness, but as the Talmud says, that is not a good reason to seek conversion, not to just have an experience in an exalted state of consciousness and then decide that you're going to change your worldviews. So it's not. It was a much more slower path. I found in Judaism a tradition that, um, first of all, had a good connection between experiences in non-ordinary realities, but also living in the physical world. Yeah, so it was both a path to navigate internal landscapes, but also a path to navigate daily life and relationships and ordinary experiences as well. I also found a resonance in the Jewish people. I always felt close to the Jewish people and the Jews that I knew. And in a way, I found that it had also these principles that you find in Buddhism. They have the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So in Judaism, you have Hashem, you have the Torah, and you have Israel. No? So it's a deep practice that I found to be really sophisticated in that threading of the non-ordinary with the ordinary. And that was something that I was missing in my life: how to make daily life, ordinary life, meaningful, even transcendental in a way, to see transcendence in every small thing that we do, and also a path to find alternative narratives to the experiences that we undergo through life. A lot of the Jewish tradition has to do with reading the same old stories again and again and finding new meanings in that and seeing how things can be read under different lights. And I think that psychedelic integration has also a lot to do about that. That we can go back to a single experience and not just decide that this is the final version that we want to stay with, but to kind of interpret one experience over and over, or allow one single experience to unfold through time and bear fruit for us. So in a way, that's become a more holistic practice for me, to be able to insert experiences in non-ordinary states with a wider framework of understanding, to have some texts in which to refer, to have a community with whom share some rituals, to be able to reinterpret and see deeper aspects of the rituals that can be as simple as lighting candles, as we do these days in Hanukkah. No? And it seems that we're just celebrating a military achievement. Then we could go into national identity aspects of celebration, but there's also a spiritual aspect into that. No? So these multiple dimensions and multiple layers in the things that we do as Jews, I think it's very, very similar to what we do with psychedelic experiences.
Well, you've completely opened it up. All of the points, all of the exciting points about being a nation of integration, what it means to have a relationship with divinity, with a myth, with a community. I wanted to just ask you, because you mentioned it as part of your path, um, Judaism as a pathway of navigating inner experiences. Could you say a little bit more about what that means? How is Judaism or any spiritual tradition a pathway of navigating inner experiences?
Hmm. I would say that maybe in Judaism is a little bit less straightforward than with other traditions. For example, Hinduism and Buddhism, uh, they have a more straightforward language for the spiritual experience. Judaism is quite cryptic when it comes to experiences in non-ordinary realities. The Kabbalah is something that's really complex, and I've only looked it from far away, so I don't claim to have any understanding about it. Um, but I think that there's a really beautiful aspect of finding your own way of, um, finding maps for navigating experiences in ordinary texts. Yeah, and that's for example, the four levels of interpretation of the Torah. You know, you can start with very literal things, but then you can go into a more allegorical or metaphorical meaning. So the pardesh, that they talk about, there's different levels of interpretation of the text, and I think that with Judaism, that's something that comes quite naturally. You can start with a pretty straightforward aspect of the experience, what I saw, what I witnessed, what I know, what I've experienced, and then go into more aspects, more details that can unfold over time and with multiple lectures. Um, so, yeah, I think that Judaism makes less emphasis on the actual phenomenology of the experience. Yeah, it's not so important what you experience, what you saw, the symbols, or so. There's less emphasis on the nature of the experience. It's more about what you do when you come back here. No, we know
Hmm.
about when Moses goes up to Sinai and has a revelation, and we don't hear much about how that experience was like for him, what he underwent, what sort of inner challenges. What we know is that he came back and people saw him different. There was a transformation that happened there, no? And I think that it seems to be more important than the experience itself. It's how we bring it back from the mountain. How do we share it with other people? So in that sense, I think that that's a very needed map in our society, that we tend to focus very much on ourselves, on in our intrapsychic experiences, in what happened to me, what I experienced, and I think that a bigger way of integrating these experiences is through a communal and societal lens.
Hmm.
So,
Beautiful. And I often speak about that image of Moses coming down from the mountain, and um, the first thing that happens is the disclosure of the ordering of society, right? Not just a personal experience, but how do we create a community? How do we create a civilization that is just, that is equitable, and that is purposeful? So maybe just to jump in then, we've been speaking already about psychedelic integration without defining it, and that happens to be one of the features of your book, that you kind of eschew any straightforward definition of it, but go into, I think, something that kind of widens the aperture of what psychedelic integration can be. And I think it's purposeful, um, but also maybe particularly complex, because what people are asking often about integration is, what is it and how do I do it? So I wanted to maybe read. There's a particular paper that I refer people to, with the definition, and I wanted to maybe get your take about what this definition of integration has that is positive, and maybe what it's lacking. So here, maybe just to try it on. Okay. Integration is a process in which a person revisits and actively engages in making sense of, working through, translating, and processing the content of their psychedelic experience. Through intentional effort and supportive practices, This process allows one to gradually capture and incorporate the emergent lessons and insights into their lives, thus moving toward greater balance and wholeness, both internally, mind, body, and spirit, and externally, lifestyle, social relations, and the natural world. So there's a couple different parts, but and it's an easy way to communicate to someone what this is really about. But maybe there's something missing for you. So I'd love to hear maybe about your reflection.
Yeah, I agree completely with that definition of integration. I like particularly the fact that they include the word process in the definition. Yeah, so it's not something that you do just in, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours, or because you spoke with a therapist, then the integration's done. It's an ongoing process, as any process with psychedelic experiences is. It's something that unfolds through time. Yeah. Um, and I think that this definition explains very well the what I could call the active part of the integration. It's like something
Mm,
that you do intentionally, as it says in the definition. So it's a practice that you're doing with a purpose, with an intention. And I do agree with that. I think that if we put some intention in our integration process, it will be much better. It will go smoother. We can benefit much more than just having the experience and forgetting about it. But I also think that there's an aspect missing in this definition, which is the non intentional aspect of integration. I think that there's a part of our integration that happens despite we trying. It happens sometimes through time. It happens through random experiences that we meet. Somebody that reminds us of something that happened in our experience, or certain things they just need time to happen. As when you plant a seed and a tree grows, not because you water it more or you focus your attention more on that tree, it will grow faster. Some things need time. So patience and kind of trusting that the process will unfold naturally is also part of integration, in my understanding. Sometimes we make a lot of focus on what we should do, and my fear or my concern in this situation is that we might be creating a need for people. It's like you have to do your integration, and to do your integration you need to do this and that. And that's not something that I can agree with. Some people might need certain practices, some people might need some other practices, and some people will do the integration on their own terms, without anybody directing or telling them what to do.
mm.
So
So then why would someone, thank you for that reflection. Why would someone then need psychedelic integration in the first place? Let's maybe start there. People are having they're having a good time with these substances, or they're doing it for some healing reason, or engaged in other practices that evoke a non-ordinary state of consciousness. Of course, breathing, dance, other trance-inducing practices. Um, why integration at all? Why not the experience being enough?
mm, there might be instances in which experience will be enough, but I would say that that rarely is the case. That just experience is going to be enough to produce long-lasting transformation or long-lasting healing effects. I think that integration is needed because that's what's going to allow us to turn a single experience into a process.
Hmm.
We are expanding the time that we devote to the experience, the attention that we devote to the experience. Therefore, we're turning it into a process. And that's what's really about. The experience is a single event, but then as we learn to see it becoming a process, then we gain some agency in this process. We're not
Hmm.
passive elements of the experience and the experience that happened to us. We become active agents of the experience and we work with experience. Therefore, we minimize the risk of just forgetting about the experience. That's a real risk about psychedelic experiences. We had, I don't know, a spiritual experience on last evening, and then today it's very fresh, but then tomorrow we need to go back to work, and then we get with the rushes of daily life, and in a week time, it seems like you didn't even have that experience. So there is a real threat of just the experience dissolving itself and not having any meaningful impact. Therefore, devoting some time on doing integration practices right after the experience, I think, can be extremely helpful to allow to ground experience to, make it more accessible for us. So in that sense, I do think that integration is a need if we really want to honor the experience that we just had. It's not that often that we have psychedelic experiences. For those of us that have busy lives and families and career and a house to take care of, finding, I don't know, a full day or a weekend to kind of go inwards, that it's quite precious, so as much as we care for that time that we are having the experience, we could also care a little bit of the time afterwards and honor the experience that we just had.
Hmm.
So,
So maybe just intentionally e- expanding the time frame in which we think about the experience that we're entering into, not just when you step into the tent and when you step out, but everything that's happening before, during, and after, so that it's an all-inclusive experience. I guess maybe what I also want to ask, you mentioned some of the risks of not integrating an experience, not taking full advantage of it, letting it just kind of go by. I'd be interested also in hearing, you mentioned in the book, two other risks that I do see in my work here in Shefa, and we see together, is ego inflation and spiritual bypass. How are these actually risks of not engaging with psychedelic integration?
yeah. Well, we could define the word risk. Many times, these two situations will not be something that will cause any harm to the person, but
Mm,
most likely it's something that will hinder their capacity to really move forward. Yeah, so we can become blinded by our own experiences. We can become trapped in our own ego traits, and that gets in the way of a true healing and true spiritual life. Yeah,
mm,
so ego inflation, I think that's the one of the main risks of any practice that involves uh, s- experiences in non-ordinary states. Yeah, not only through psychedelic substances, but any practice that will involve some extraordinary experiences has the risk of inducing ego inflation. Why? Because our ego gets um, faced with greater universes, and greater dimensions. We find these dimensions inside of ourselves, and it's easy that the ego will appropriate of that. Yeah, will take hold of what we've seen and then think that it's us, it's me, that I'm special because I have all these universes inside, no, or I've accessed these memories, I've accessed these experiences. In a certain way, it's a natural phenomenon. I think that we all go through a phase of ego inflation, most likely in our early stages of psychedelic experimentation, because we can feel the first hints of healing, the first experiences of expansion, of love, of feeling okay being who we are, of feeling in a place that is welcoming. So all of a sudden, there's these beautiful experiences, and therefore we might feel called to share these experiences, to preach, to I don't know, to really be in love, be in this honeymoon phase, as I call it.
mm,
And then it is okay to go through some phases of ego inflation. Most likely, if we continue the path, we will see that this was only a phase, and then we see that there's also other aspects inside ourselves that we were not seeing before and that are not so pleasant to experience, but we also need to be confronted with that. No? And hopefully, in a structured process of non-ordinary state of consciousness, we will have somebody that will help us to point the moments in which we're going into this ego inflation. Yeah. Spiritual bypass can also be another form of risk in the sense that we're using the experiences that are spiritual to avoid confronting things that we need to face. Yeah, so our experiences can be very spiritual, very transcendent, very transpersonal, but then our family life is a mess, or I'm not a responsible father or a responsible husband or whatever. No, like then I'm not walking my talk. Yeah, maybe because that is too painful to address what's happening at home or to address what happened in my childhood, and we prefer to be in touch with those bright worlds. But that is only a partial truth, So in order to fully advance, to fully heal, to fully become who we are, we also need to embrace these other parts that are not so pleasant. Yeah, but yeah, we live in a society that preaches very much this only going towards the light and only yeah, overcoming all our fears. It seems that psychedelics should help you to overcome your fears even without facing them. No?
mm,
So it's not like that. No, I like there's a quote by a rabbi that I don't remember who he was, that says that the problem with people is that they want to change overnight and they want to sleep well that night. So, so it's not that easy. So
Hmm. So that, I think, maybe just opening. Thank you for all of that, and maybe pointing to a little bit about what I'm seeing in the field about not just in the Jewish community but in all communities. Um, about more substance and less integration. It feels like such a common phenomenon. I think you pointed to it a little bit, especially with that quote from that rabbi. Maybe we'll find who it was. But maybe there's something, an underlying issue with humanity or people in the West, or I'm not sure what, that are seeking more and more experiences and kind of leaving integration as an afterthought or never engaging with it at all. One of them you said is not actually facing our fears, like just kind of like jumping over them, or thinking that we have done the work already in a non-ordinary state of consciousness. But do you think that there's something more there, that people are kind of avoiding integration altogether, but think that the amount of experiences that they kind of put on the board is the significant aspect of this work?
yeah, that's a very good question and a complex one. I don't think that I have a simple answer for that,
Sure.
but I believe that there's a mixture of different elements. Yeah, and to begin with, um, not because it's the most important or there's any specific order in that, no, but the society that we live in, that somehow, yeah, it's consumerist and capitalist society. Nothing against that, but some of the principles sometimes is the more the better. That there's you need to continue growing in order to be doing okay. So I think that that is shaping somehow the way that psychedelics are used. Um, in my understanding, psychedelics, we have as a species we have used them in different ways, but most of the times when we use them was in a self-organized way. Yeah, of course that you would have the shaman, but it would be the shaman of a small village. I don't know, like 100 people, 200. Maybe when you're 300, then there's a couple or three shamans, no? So it's not a practice that can become scaled, like really, in a big scale, no? But what we see now is that we're outsourcing those roles. Yeah, so you go to a retreat somewhere in Peru or in the Amazon or whatever, you go to a therapist that maybe you barely know. So we have externalized this way of doing psychedelic. Somebody is in charge of orchestrating the experience for you, and that's why we need integration afterwards, because we do not have a community that is holding those experiences. Yeah,
Hmm.
so then I think that the demand and offer of psychedelic experiences is subject of the laws of the market. Yeah, so then we see some people, especially most of the times people that are in this honeymoon phase of the psychedelic experience, or that they have been very much into an ego inflation trip, feel the call to share this experience with other people and set a business around it. you know and I don't know how one can make a business out of it, because if you want to really be true to the essence of this job, as I said before, you cannot scale it very much. If you're scaling it, you're doing something different. Yeah, because how big can a ceremony be? How many ceremonies can you do in a week? So there is a natural limit in the way that psychedelic therapy or psychedelic ceremonies can happen. So I think that that's part of what we're seeing. Then something else is that these experiences, when they are so precious, and gathering with a group and doing a ceremony is something so beautiful, something that can feel so healing, so nice. We go with like-minded people, we share a space of love, respect, compassion. We go in our deep journeys, we share them with other people. That is very rare in the world that we live in. So no wonder that people want to repeat that and want to have more of that. Yeah, almost like an imprint of what human relationships could be like. Like no matter your background, you go to a ceremony and everybody's welcome there, everybody's taken care of. We share a certain practice. So I can see the appeal of that. I can see why people want to go over and over to these experiences, because yeah, probably it's a better sort of interaction with the world than in our daily lives, no, that's very much driven by hurries, jobs, I don't know. So I think that it's also natural that it is happening. But also, I believe that we are incorporating some of the medical model into the thinking about psychedelics. It's
Hmm.
like you take this and this will heal you. Yeah, so this is a very medical approach to psychedelics, which I don't agree that much with it. So of course that it can heal, but it's not because of what you're taking. Then, if you're not healed, it seems that you need to take more and more and more. So there might be this linear and simplistic way of thinking that I need to take more in order to continue learning, healing, advancing, or whatever. And I think that that's a Western mistake. Like the more the better, or if you have not yet felt what you wanted to feel, is that you need to take more or a different substance or go to more retreats. No, I think it's more about the quality than the quantity.
Hmm.
So
So maybe we can talk a little bit in a bit about your recommendations for individuals and groups of people who are doing this work, um, going to ceremonies or being with themselves or with a sitter or a therapist, about kind of deepening into their integration practices. But before that, I wanted to get into very a sweet part of your book, which is the metaphors, the useful metaphors for understanding integration. So I think that you have chosen 10 metaphors. Is that correct? Um,
I'm not really
eh,
sure about the number.
okay, yeah.
One, so
I think something like that. But I'd be interested, first of all, why did you choose to define integration? Maybe it's 11. Why did you choose to define integration with a set of metaphors? And maybe just to share, like, what are some of the metaphors that you're working with most often with the people that you are working with in
yeah,
psychedelic integration?
I think that the beautiful thing about metaphors is that they are almost a universal language. So with very few words, you can talk about complex um, topics. Yeah. Therefore, you don't need to go into very elaborate descriptions. You just point the metaphor, and everybody will understand and will even come to an image and be able to make it theirs. It's like, okay, I understand what that means. Also, because the object that we're trying to describe, integration, has many faces. I imagine this like this geometrical figure that you can look from many different angles. So each metaphor can speak about one of the approaches to integration, one of the angles in which we're looking at integration. Therefore, is a way of defining something in an expansive way. I used to work with some teachers that made it very clear that what's important in integration practices is to provide tools that can amplify the meaning of what we have experienced, not to reduce the
Hmm.
meaning of what we have experienced. Yeah? So you could go in the direction, and this is going to be very simplistic, yeah, but using a dictionary of symbols, like if you saw a snake in your dream, that means that this, and that, yeah, or use, I don't know, Freudian interpretations. Yeah. So if you are a Freudian and you interpret a snake as a phallic symbol, that interpretation goes in a very specific direction that could be very reductionist. Yeah. If you are a Jungian analyst and you interpret the snake as something else, not a spiritual element or whatever, that could go into another dimension. Does it mean that one is true and the other is not? I don't know, maybe all of them can be part of the truth. So the same way when trying to define integration, to try to provide as a definition that could amplify what we understand by integration, not to reduce and limit the what we can get out of our experiences.
So, the one that I appreciate most right now is weathering the storm. The idea of integration is weathering the storm. Maybe you could say a little bit about this metaphor, and also just to include, you have an amazing quote that you found from Abraham Joshua Heschel, actually, which I love, um, where he said, when a vessel sails into a typhoon and the maw of the boiling maelstrom opens to engulf the tottering prey, it is not the pious man engrossed in supplication, but the helmsman who interferes in the proper sphere with proper means, fighting with physical powers. What sense is there in imploring the mercy of God? Words do not stem the flood, nor does meditation banish the storm. So yeah, what does weathering the storm mean?
Yeah. For those that know something about sailing, you know that when conditions get very rough, then you are not sailing anymore towards your objective. Yeah, when conditions get rough, you're just trying to stay afloat. You're trying to survive, and then there's this element that it's like an anchor, like a surface anchor or water anchor that you throw it in the water, and what it does is to align the boat towards the waves. Yeah. So what you don't want in a storm is to be like crossed from the waves, because then you could capsize. What you want is to be facing the waves, be facing the this storm that's coming towards you. And although you're not going to be able to maneuver and to go where you wanted to go, you're going to be able to be facing the storm. You're going to be able to be facing these waves that are coming towards you incessantly. Yeah. And that's what's going to allow us to stay afloat. And eventually, when the storm has passed, we can take that anchor again and start sailing towards our objective. Yeah. Psychedelic integration can be like that sometimes when we have had a difficult experience and we have these intense waves of emotions or thoughts or memories or physical sensations that become threatening, that become so scary to go through. It's not that we should avoid that. It's not that we should take something to reduce that. We should find ways to face that without capsizing, without drowning, you know. And many times to do that, the classic integration activities such as journaling, meditation, mandala drawing will not be enough. You know, they could provide some relief. Yeah, they could be better than nothing. But most of the times, as Heschel says in this quote, these pious activities, this praying, will not feel that is enough. We need to do something that is more practical, something that is more directed towards managing to weather the storm. You know, so I think that this is when certain therapeutic integration practices come in hand, and that's what I talk about in the book. No, these different approaches to support people who are struggling with physical symptoms, with rumination, with obsessive thinking, with anxiety. You know that these pious activities will not be enough to deal with. Yeah.
So maybe let's keep going down this path because I think maybe not surprising to you. Um, when more Jewish people are engaging in psychedelic experience, at least the ones who then get picked up in a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group or come to Shefa, um, the confrontation with intergenerational trauma, epigenetic trauma, I would say even kind of like mimetic trauma, where people don't have members of their family who have been caught up in genocide or displacement or being aggressed against for generations, but it's part of the culture, right? It's still kind of in the field. Are having really powerful experiences of, let's just say, imagery from the Holocaust, or they've seen movies, of course, and so it just kind of comes into them. Um, where there is such intense pain and dysregulation that weathering the storm, for example, feels like the apt metaphor. But also, it sounds like the journaling, the speaking about, the mandala drawing is not enough. So, what would you recommend for someone who is encountering something that intense, that often, as a course of psychedelic integration in a particular cultural context?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. And again, I don't know if I have one answer for that.
Sure,
The specific interventions for each case would depend
of
on the
course.
person and what's going on. And in my therapeutic practice, and I hope that it shows in the book and when I teach about it, it's really important for me to understand the how the problem manifests or what people understand and describe as the challenge. Because some people might have had an experience of reliving memories from the Holocaust or tapping into genocide experiences that maybe it's not themselves who have experienced that, but a family member or a cultural group or whatever. But they go through this without too many challenges. I mean, the experience can be challenging, but they do not report afterwards to need specific support afterwards. Yeah? So
Hmm.
how come that somebody will need that and somebody will not? So it's really important for me to understand what's happening in your particular situation that you're experiencing this as a problem. Yeah? Sometimes people from certain cultural backgrounds, we will be more will be better equipped to deal with that. I'm remembering some a friend of mine, a woman in her late 70s, yeah, Jewish, from Argentina, but with a lot of family from Eastern Europe and a lot of family that perished or was murdered in the Holocaust, yeah. And in her psilocybin experience, she went through back through time and space and reliving different atrocities, persecution, threats, not only during the Holocaust, but like forever, and it was a really, really difficult experience to navigate for her because time was folding and she wouldn't know if she was now in 2000 whatever or back in 1939 or back in 1492 or back in back and back, so all
Hmm.
the everything was happening at the same time. So it was a difficult experience, but afterwards what she came to was like, I've experienced the suffering of my people, all the suffering of all the generations, and in a way I see how much we carry, and I see that that has shaped who we are and has shaped who I am. But in a way, that was something that empowered her. Like I've been able to, not only me, but me and all my ancestors, they have been able to survive all this. No, so we are a damaged people, but we're also very resilient and very strong people. No, and she needed no further support after this experience. So that can also be not it
Sure.
doesn't mean that a challenging experience needs to imply challenges in integration. I would say that it's a measure as well of how often we go into these experiences. If we are going to psychedelic journeys and all of them are being very challenging, maybe we want to reduce a little bit the intensity or the frequency and allow enough time to see what is coming after the experience. Yeah, what are the remnants of these difficult experiences that we're having and what we need to work with, because sometimes it will be a matter of exposure to that, if you will. Like we need to go to certain experiences over and over again. Sometimes to deal with traumatic events, we need two, three, four, five, six experiences. Yeah, that can be. But sometimes it's just that we also need to modify the circumstances that we are in. That we're not getting the message, or we're getting the message that we're not applying it, then the experience is going to repeat again. You know,
Mm.
so I think it's a fine balance between diving deep into our experiences, but also then doing the homework when we go out. And that's its joke. No, I keep having the same message over and over in my ayahuasca journeys. Like, all right, but have you actually done the message? Have you executed it or not? No,
Yeah.
because then if it keeps coming up, it's maybe that you need to
Mm.
listen to it. So
So maybe, speaking about homework and from the professor here, um, I'd be interested in hearing, and I know people who are listening, maybe just some practical steps when people are not working with therapists, they're not working in communities of practice. How would an individual or a small group of people who are working with these powerful experiences start their integration journey as well, just on their own?
yeah, I think that this is an essential question, and we should go more in this direction rather than the clinical one or the professional or
Hmm.
the therapeutic one, because if we aim that psychedelics will become something that can effectively and truly help us as a species, we need to develop this small scale way of doing them. Now, as you said, an individual or a group of like minded people that they decide to orchestrate this experience for themselves, we need to learn to do that collectively. Yeah, so
Hmm.
we will not depend on an external source to prepare that for us. So I would say that a metaphor that comes to mind to describe the situation would be a gift. So what you do with a gift? A gift, you choose it, and then you buy it, and then you wrap it, and then you give it to the person, and then they unwrap it. So psychedelic experiences are like gifts. That's something that's going to happen, that ceremony that we will have on the weekend, I don't know, a month from today. Yeah. So if we start thinking about it as a gift, we can start planning beforehand. Okay, how am I going to wrap this gift? What am I going to be doing the days and weeks before the experience? What am I going to be doing the days and weeks after the experience? So we're not just contemplating the experience itself or the weekend itself, but also the time building towards it and the time after the experience. Yeah, and then if we can create a nice wrapping for that experience, that is going to become a much more powerful gift. We know that the paper in which we wrapped a gift is not very precious. Yeah, it's like what, $1 in a shop. I mean, it doesn't have any sort of value, but receiving a gift that is wrapped in a nice paper makes a huge difference. It's a different experience, yeah, to receive a gift well wrapped than just the gift itself. So taking care of the wrapping, I think it can really enhance the the value of psychedelic experiences. So maybe the kind of books that you're reading before the experience, the kind of movies that you're watching, if you spend some time in meditation, if you change something in your habit or your diet or your workload, and we will have different ways of doing this, each of one of us, but for sure that we can start tapping into this mentality. Like, all right, an experience is coming 5 weeks from now. What can I start doing so I will get to that moment somehow prepared, if you will, no, with the better spirits possible, yeah. And I think that the Jewish tradition for that is very good. It teaches us to think about the next holiday that's coming, and to somehow prepare for that. And we have holidays that they last for a lot of days, so you can actually immerse that this is actually happening. Maybe one day you forget, and then another day you remember again. You do the prayers in the day, and then the next day you don't do them. Whatever, but you have a period of time for something that is coming or something that you're experiencing. And I think that that is what really makes it potentially transformational, because you are immersed in that experience. It's not one day. It's not like tomorrow we're gonna celebrate New Year's Eve, no. And many times that's just one day. Yeah, people make goals and plans for next year and determinations of I'm gonna go to the gym every day or whatever, but usually they don't last. Yeah, because what? That's something that you do the day before, maybe, or even the same night, and you forget probably the next morning. Yeah, so there's not a lot of coming coming
Mhm.
on towards that, and then there's not a lot of space for decompressing. Yeah, so if we can do that, I think that our psychedelic experiences will improve a lot. And
So
then,
you're already here just connecting, just thinking, I asked you about integration, and I kind of like powerful gestures moving from kind of the end to the beginning. So you're kind of connecting the pieces of the experience all together, kind of creating an arc. So yes, so preparation, uh, kind of fundamental to what the outcome will be, and thinking about the lead up. A beautiful metaphor is the gift.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
then after the experience, I think it's good to also consider that as time that you will devote to the experience. Most of the times we say, okay, the ceremony is going to be on Saturday, and then Sunday morning we go home. Why not give it some extra time? Why don't have a full day for integration, even if there's not a lot of activity to be done? Just some writing, some sharing with friends, some being in nature, being in silence, having some extra time to be with experience. I always suggest people to write about the experience, to create a report about the experience. And if you want to adorn your writing with some painting, with some colors, with some images, with some mandalas, with some collages, whatever, I think that this combination of a verbal description of the experience with non-verbal or artistic expression of the experience can be really, really powerful. That somehow will be like the picture of you at the end of the experience. And it's going to be much easier to revisit and recapture what happened in the experience if you did that on the next day or the couple of days after the experience. Yeah. So just allowing time to write about the experience, play some soft music or even the music that you listen during the experience, and write your journey with as much detail as you can remember. I suggest people write in first person and in present tense as it is happening as you're writing. Yeah, instead of a memory from the past, you write as it is happening. I think that just with this, we would most likely benefit and retain more of the uh, insights of the experience. And if then maybe a week after the experience or 2 weeks you can catch up again with the same people and have a meal together and talk about it, that will probably extend the feeling that we're doing something together, something meaningful,
Mm.
So
So, what about maybe in the context of that group that you spoke about, something um, that is kind of self organized, like-minded people you mentioned? What maybe is for you the ideal dynamics of that group? Are people making suggestions, like you said, um, that maybe narrowing the experience to kind of a set of parameters or definitions or interpretations isn't helpful, but kind of expanding what is possible? What are the people in the group doing while an individual is also doing their integration? Are they just there to receive? Are they sharing what has worked for them in the past? Maybe avoiding interpretation based on their own set of limited definitions. What is ideal for you?
hmm. Yeah, I like to keep it simple. I think that what works best most of the times is to keep it really simple. And
Mhm.
what means keeping it simple? That we just share our experiences and we witness other people's experiences without interpretation, without questions, without analyzing, without suggesting, like just observing as much as possible in awe of the wide range of experiences that people can have and feeling grateful for people opening to us and sharing with us what they went through. Um, I think that this is probably what will work better in most situations, rather than engaging in interpretations or having like more conversation style. Um, yeah, when I teach people how to run integration circles, that's based on the tradition of the holotropic breathwork that I've been practicing for a long time. We do it like that. Somebody opens the sharing circle. We provide some principles for sharing, but some of these principles as that the sharing is also self-directed. It's like each and every one of us, we're gonna have certain amount of time to share, and then we're gonna share what has heart and what has meaning. As Angeles Arrien used to say, that was a friend from Stan Grof's from the Basque Country. What has heart and what has meaning, what you can bring to this group. Yeah? And the rest of us will listen and don't make any interpretations or anything. No? And when the person is finished, we just thank them for the sharing and then we move on to the next person. Yeah. I think that this, on the one hand, takes out the pressure of having to say something about the experience. Sometimes we're not listening; we're more kind of paying attention to the smart thing that I'm going to say next when the person finishes thinking. So it's like
Of
let's
course.
focus on listening what the person has to say. And many times we see that through carefully listening and paying attention to what people say, there's a lot of clarity that comes for us as well. I have heard hundreds of times how people say, after being in the sharing circle, I started feeling very anxious, very confused about my experience. But after hearing everybody, I could resonate with so many things that my own experience became much more clarified. And that's without any specific intervention from anybody, any specific interpretation from any specific modality. It just happens on its own. So I think that um, that is an, a way to honor the experience. Psychedelic experiences, they are non-directive. They tap into our own inner wisdom, our own inner worlds, and we don't need anybody to direct those experiences. So I think that in integration, that's the same way. Integration should provide the sort of setting for things to happen, but not make things happen to you. Same as a lot of the Jewish practices that we have. In Judaism, what I like about it is that nobody really tells you what you need to believe. They won't get too much into your inner experiences. Like, okay,
Mm.
let's do this. We're gonna light these candles. We're gonna say these prayers. We're gonna eat these things during these days, and then you probably will have an experience. But it's not my role to interpret your experience or to tell you the experience that you should have. Our role is to collectively create the possibility of the holiday with the meal, with the prayers, with whatever, and then your experience is yours to have, and that's your relationship with the divine. So it's not my role to get in the way of that. So I see integration in a similar way to that.
Hmm. So maybe we can talk another time about positive models for group uh, psychedelic integration. Feels like a rich topic to continue. We're getting close to the end of our time, but there's a text from the Talmud that I wanted to share with you, and to get your interpretation, because I share it often in integration work. And so to hear from your perspective would be just such a gift for me.
I'm excited
Um,
about it.
Great, good. I think it comes from Masechet Eruvin. I'm pretty sure I don't have the citation here, but it says, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah once said, "Once a child got the better of me." And so he's describing something that happened in the past, an interaction with a child. "I was traveling, and I met with a child at a crossroads. I asked him, 'Which way to the city?' And he answered, 'This way is short and long, and this way is long and short.'" So then he continues, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, "I took the short and long way. I soon reached the city, but found my approach obstructed by gardens and orchards. So I retraced my steps and said to the child, 'My son, did you not tell me that this is the short way?' Answered the child, 'Did I not tell you that it is also long?'" So, the way that the Talmud is just sometimes these rabbinic stories are so precise, sometimes like a koan, right? That there's a question mark at the end. But um, what do you see in this story, especially as we've been speaking about the long roads of psychedelic integration? What do you see maybe as the wisdom for our own practice in this text?
Oh, that's a really good story. I didn't know it. Um, I love the fact that it's a child that is in the crossroads, no?
Hmm.
And the rabbi is asking to a child instead of assuming that they know better than the child, no? And I think that this story talks about something that is very common in psychedelic therapy and psychedelic experience, also in Judaism, which is to learn to progressively be comfortable with paradoxes. Yeah, being Jewish is a constant paradox. It can be wonderful and it can be dreadful as well. Uh, and psychedelic experiences can also be full of paradoxes. Yeah, and learning to be, and also the whole Jewish tradition is full with paradoxes. You read the Bible and oh my God, this God, uh, how to feel about it? No, like he goes
Mm.
killing people and destroying things, and then being compassionate, and then like it's full of paradoxes. But I think that there's a huge wisdom in holding paradoxes and not having to decide, just holding the paradoxes. Like you said, like the koans, like being there in this space that is not long, not short, and is short and long at the same time. There can be a huge learning in that space. Yeah. And I think that that also teaches us, because in this story, I'm thinking that the guy doesn't get to the city. No, the guy stays at the crossroads. And I think that many times we forget that. We think that psychedelic experience should be about getting to the city, having the death and rebirth experience, overcoming our fears, healing our trauma. But not that often we remember that what is important is to actually stay at the gates, or to stay at the crossroads, to stay with this idea of being stuck, with being with the feelings of not having healed our traumas, with being with the experience of I'm not able to complete my ego death, or death and rebirth, like staying where you are. It seems that the story is asking the rabbi to stay where he is, like, all right, you're here in this crossroads, and this is where you are, no? So I think that that's, yeah, maybe something to think more about when we go into psychedelic journeys, to
Mm.
be where we really are.
Mm. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your reading. And we, as you said, we could revisit this over and again for more and more reflection. But great to just get started in our relationship together and your relationship with the Jewish psychedelic community. Would love to have you be part of this expanding circle.
Yeah, I feel kind of jealous that you guys have that going on in the States that much. Here in Spain, the Jewish community is very small, very divided, and not psychedelic at all, So it
Okay.
feels very, very difficult to follow this path here. So
Well, we will try to bring you in as much as we can. Of course, visiting your website and seeing what your offerings are, your lectures, your writings, your trainings, and just you, Marc, yourself, a gift to this field and to our people. And thank you so much for being here with us and sharing everything as a gift.
thank you so much, Jack.